Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nimhauser. You can find me and all of the things we do on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram at Hawk Blogger. You can find our audio editions on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We always appreciate your 5-star reviews there. And if you want ad-free audio, you can get it at patreon.com/hawkblogger. Also gets you access to the Discord server and a bunch of other fun stuff. It is a Monday, March 16th. We are 1 week, like 7 days into free agency. And I have to admit, I was like really debating about what to do the show on today because I don't think there's a lot of really meaningful news going on right now. I'll share some of the things that have happened since we last spoke, but not a lot of it tectonic in its importance and its like impact on what's going on with the team. So I thought about just skipping entirely, to be honest. But the fact of the matter is, I am driving down to Bandon Dunes tomorrow to golf with like 20 of my buddies, and going to be there the rest of the week. And there won't be shows for maybe until Sunday. So it's going to be the longest stretch of no Hawk Blogger mornings for like since like 2 years. I don't think we've gone this long. I'm not going to have a bunch of stuff already queued up, so it's just going to be silent. And hopefully you guys can manage without me. I think there's a lot of other people doing great content that you'll enjoy. And we'll who knows? Maybe something so crazy will happen that I will do some kind of impromptu show from down in Bandon. Probably not, though. I'm going to be golfing 36 holes a day, walking a ton, hanging out with my friends, enjoying as much as we can. So enjoy it yourself as well. Maybe take a little bit of a break if you choose. So what I do want to talk about today, because I honestly have been spending the last 2.5 hours roughly. I've been watching film on different prospects that I like or I'm interested in learning about. So I've watched a bunch of offensive line tape and Senior Bowl tape, and then I was watching some cornerback tape. I was watching some safety stuff. I was watching a bunch of stuff, and I was going to do kind of a draft dig in, and I got to admit, like, none of it moved me that much. There were some interior offensive linemen that I took some notes on that I liked what I saw, and I'd be comfortable with the Seahawks maybe making a move there. Saw some good cornerback stuff. But none of it, like, I don't have a draft crush really developing in that we haven't already talked about. Like, I love D'Angelo Pons, even though he's very small. And, there's some of these guys I really do like, but that didn't feel like the right place to spend the time. And honestly, I'll spend more time on draft, but Rob Staten's got that covered pretty well. There's plenty of draft coverage. I'll bring on some additional guests and we'll talk through that, in the coming weeks. What I kind of found myself wanting to look at is the state of the roster, because there were some moves that were made since the last time we spoke. And let's go ahead and update you if you have not been following everything going on with free agency and with the Seahawks. Let me pull this up for you and I'll make it nice and big and visible for you. And that's good enough. So let me pull this up for you guys so you can see. So this is where things stand with the Seahawks, after 1 week. The new names that we had not mentioned since last time, actually, I'm not seeing Shamar Jean Charles is not listed here. Let me see what's wrong with my spreadsheet. He should be there. So not sure why he's not showing up. I'll investigate that later. But the Seahawks did bring back cornerback Shamar Jean Charles, who had been with the Saints the previous year, was with the Seahawks last year, largely on the ready squad, the practice squad. And so they bring him back. He's a cornerback. He is generally, like, he can play inside or outside, but he's also a special teamer. So not a huge move, but another cornerback in the mix. They also signed Noah Igbenogany. I had this before. Igbenogany, I believe is how you pronounce his name. Igbenogany. And he is a former first round pick, has played with the Commanders. And this was a more meaningful signing than Shamar Jean-Charles. This is, as I said, a guy that's been a former first round pick. And um, I like what I see on film of him. He has not been graded well by PFF. PFF does not like what it sees from Noah. He has been, below average starter grade pretty much every season and in every facet of his game. Not a big fan of his. And in fact, I want to bring up something there. Where was it? Because I'm curious if there's any tells on why his grades have been down, but they have been. Like last year, he was a 55.6 graded corner. He was a 54.4 coverage grade. He hasn't had a coverage grade over 55 in any of his 6 seasons in the NFL. He was originally drafted by the Dolphins in 2020. And let me just look really quickly at penalty situation, because a lot of times penalties end up being an issue. Not a lot of penalties, which is not great. Honestly, if there's more penalties, it would give you a sign that maybe they tend to really be harsh on grading when there's penalties involved. He had 3 penalties last year. He had 6 penalties in 2024. Not great tackling grades. Although what I saw of him, he's a willing, tackler. He's not shy for that. He's, average height, 5'11", 200 pounds. This is not a signing that's going to kind of change the course of Seahawks history necessarily. He played 373 snaps for the Commanders last year. He played 819 the year before that. And I think the most notable thing is that it is another corner, and in this case, a veteran corner. And it says Rodney Thomas as cornerback here. That is also incorrect. So let me I'm seeing things as we go live that yeah, he's not a cornerback. He is a safety. That will help us kind of assess where things are. So that brings up essentially, 4 players from off the roster that the Seahawks have signed. That is Emmanuel Wilson, the running back, Noah Igbinoghene, Rodney Thomas, the safety, and DeAnthony Bell, the safety, who also really was with the Seahawks all last year. So you can kind of say it's 3 players who were not on the Seahawks roster last year. And none of them are necessarily clear game-changing additions to Seattle. So where does that leave the kind of the state of the roster? And that's what I wanted to go through today. There were a couple other moves that, I'll touch on, throughout the league. There's another trade today. Justin Fields was traded from the Jets to the Chiefs. There's a little bit of Seahawks interest there if you're a Russell Wilson fan, because there were some rumors that Russell Wilson would go to the Chiefs. That's now not the case. Justin Fields will be probably the starter to begin the season, given Patrick Mahomes' knee injury that he's going to be recovering from. But Ken Walker will be taking handoffs from Justin Fields. That's a lot of speed in the backfield. That could be kind of an interesting thing to watch, although Justin Fields played with Breece Hall last year, and it didn't really make that much of a difference. So part of what I wanted to go through is just let's just talk about where the depth chart is. And then I'm going to share with you a couple of other things that stood out to me. Well, I'll even start there, and then we're going to go through the depth chart in a second. If you look at the Seahawks spending, a lot of times where the teams spend money and don't spend money tells you a lot about their perception of their roster and where they are in their development. So if you look at the Seahawks last year, 2025, right? And you look at the amount of money they spent on offense, all offensive positions, it was dead last in the NFL. $75 million on offensive spending. They won a Super Bowl that way. Keep that in mind. A lot of teams, a lot of focus on offense. Seahawks were dead last in the NFL in offensive spending last year. They won a Super Bowl. Okay. Now, That has already changed pretty significantly this season. Even though they haven't added a lot of outside players, there are players who are getting more, their salary, their contracts are moving up. They've re-signed some guys. They obviously signed Rashid Shaheed to a pretty big deal. The Seahawks are no longer $75 million a year. They're no longer dead last in the NFL. They've moved up. They are 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 19th in spending this year at $132 million on offense. So they have invested in their offense. Last year, defensively, they were actually toward the bottom of the league in defensive spending. Not at the bottom, but toward the bottom. If you go into 2026, they have risen quite a bit. They are 8th in the NFL in defensive spending. So 8th in defensive spending, 19th in offensive spending. This is a defensive-led team. That is not a surprise. That's kind of what we've learned to expect from, Mike McDonald. I don't know if it'll always be that way, but it is the state of the roster now. And if you look at the way the Seahawks constructed that Super Bowl winning roster, it really was defense first. It was, trading for Leonard Williams. It was signing at that time Draymond Jones and Uchenna Nwosu, and free agent dollars were largely going to the defensive side of the ball. The trade for Ernest Jones, the using of a first round pick on Byron Murphy, and so on and so forth. A lot of the offensive side is very young, other than Sam Darnold, who's not even that old. But I told you a bunch of times, one of the youngest offensive lines in the league. Generally, a pretty good young tight end group, right? Like young tight ends. It was a pretty young running back room. So youth usually means rookie contracts, usually means cheaper deals. And the other thing that I started to look at, as we'll get into the depth chart here, I promise, in just a second, is kind of percentage of spend by position and where that leaves things. So keep in mind, this is not an apples to apples, because when I say what are they spending on defensive tackles, there's a certain number of defensive tackles that are going to be on the field at any time, the certain number that you're going to have on the roster. Certain number of wide receivers, certain numbers of offensive tackles, so on and so forth. So this is a little bit, just take it for what it's worth. It's just a snapshot of where the Seahawks are spending their money and where they're spending the percentage of cap. And so let me just kind of go through this, because I think it's kind of interesting. Maybe it's just me. 2026, and this is the current state of things. No restructures or changes of contracts. This is just where the contracts are as of March 16th. Okay. Total spend by base salary. The number one position is defensive tackle at $24.5 million. This is just base salary, not cap hit base salary. So that is roughly 16% of the Seahawks total salary spend in 2026. It is 16.2% of total salary cap spend. So I also looked at the salary cap hits for the different position groups. So it's interesting, and I think it makes sense that the best position group on this team is also the highest percentage of spend. That, at least in my mind, is logical. The second highest percentage of total, not total salary cap, but base salary, is edge. 15% of the total salary they're spending is on the edge group, $23.1 million in 2026. So that is not the second highest percentage of cap spend. This is where base salary and cap aren't always going to be in the same thing, because you can kind of spread some things out. You have signing bonuses that are not part of base salary, all this stuff. I'm not going to bore you with all these little minutia details, but the second highest percentage of cap goes to the quarterback position. Sam Darnold, Drew Lock, Jalen Milroe. This also makes sense to me. Nothing like out of whack so far, right? From there, the third highest percentage of salary spend is wide receiver. And that's also the fourth highest in total percentage of cap. This is before a JSN extension. This is, Cooper Kupp, Rashid Shaheed, the Jake Bobo contract, I believe. Let me double check. Is it on here? Let me double check. One more place. Where did I put that? I believe the Jake Bobo contract's on there. Yes, it is on there. The $3.5 million. Okay. So wide receiver has bumped up quite a bit. And actually, I think I can go back and look at this. It's probably one of the positions that's changed the most for the Seahawks. So if you go to 2025, the Seahawks ranked, let's go backwards here. About 19th in wide receiver spend in 2025. In 2026, the Seahawks are up to, let me make sure I got the right counting here, like 12th. So they're coming close to top 10 in wide receiver spend. After those top four, which by the way, these are four of the more expensive position groups in the NFL. So to me, nothing's super shocking here or out of whack. But then when things get a little more interesting, at least in terms of how the Seahawks prioritize versus the rest of the NFL. So the Seahawks, number 5 highest percentage of base salary spend in 2026 goes to the inside linebacker group. And that's Drake Thomas, that's Ernest Jones. And keep in mind, like, you've got teams that just don't believe in spending money on that position group. And, the Rams are a team that typically have not, although they did extend Nate Landman. But the Rams are down toward the bottom of the NFL in linebacker spend. The lowest team in the league in linebacker spend are the Colts, the Buccaneers right now, the Giants. The top teams in linebacker spend, the Ravens, the Steelers, the Chiefs, the Texans, the 49ers, the Patriots now are up there. And it's a little bit, I think, in terms of how over the cap calculates some of who's a linebacker, there might be some outside linebacker in some of those mixes. So if you really isolate it to inside linebacker, it might be a little different. But I don't hate it for Seattle. That is part of how Mike McDonald has constructed his teams and his rosters. And it's not crazy to me. It is not the 5th highest in terms of percentage of salary cap. The next there is offensive tackle, which is where I logically would have generally thought would be toward the top 5, because it is a premium position. You just signed 2 of your young tackles to extensions, so they make up 8% of the total salary cap spend for 26. Inside linebackers at 6.5, so a little bit lower. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these, but it does give you a little bit of a view into how. Let me read it just in terms of rank from salary spend. Defensive tackle 1, edge 2, wide receiver 3, quarterback 4, inside linebacker 5, safety 6, offensive tackle 7, offensive guard 8, running back 9, cornerback 10, kicker 11, tight end 12. Tight end 12. I think that's pretty fascinating, because I think it's a really, really good group, but it's also a testament to what having young players at the position can do for you. You can have really good players and have them be not expensive. That's what you'd love in most places if you're running a team. But when you have really good players, eventually they do get expensive. So with that in mind, let's take a look a little bit at where the depth chart stands. And what that maybe means for this team going forward. All right. So let's start by looking at the offense. And what we see on the offense, I mean, a lot of this stuff is let's talk about in terms of what's pretty much set and what is still in progress. Quarterback's pretty set. Sam Darnold, Drew Lock, Jalen Milroe. I don't expect changes there. Maybe there's a quarterback that they just love that they draft. I've talked about Garrett Nussmeier. Like I find him to be an interesting and intriguing player that you can get later. I don't know that I could pull the trigger on that given, how I feel about Jalen Milroe, but who knows? But I think generally I would say that's pretty locked. You go to wide receiver. You've got Jackson Smith and Jigba, Rashid Shaheed, and Cooper Kupp as your top three. You've got Torrey Horton right behind there. You've got Jake Bobo, who's not officially signed yet. People don't understand that, I think. He has been tendered, but he has not been signed. It is likely that he will sign, but the Seahawks have removed tenders before. If nobody signs him or nobody makes an offer, they could remove the tender like down the road. And maybe he does sign elsewhere. Who knows? But he's not officially on the team. I think it's fair to expect him to be back. You've also got Ricky White III, who was on the team, like on the practice squad all last year, part of the roster sometimes. Tyrone Broden, the big 6'7" receiver. Montori Foster Jr. And I think a lot of people see the receiver room as set. I don't. And the reason I don't think it's set is because I look at rosters a little bit more the way I think a front office looks at the roster, which is at least 2 years out and generally 3 years out. And if you look to next year, Cooper Kupp's going to be off the roster almost certainly. Jake Bobo almost certainly will be off the roster. And then you've got JSN, Rashid Shaheed, Torrey Horton, which I think is really promising. But I think there is absolutely an opportunity to bring in, if you have a receiver you love in this draft, I don't have any problem with the team taking another receiver if it's like a good complementary addition to the skill sets. I don't think the Seahawks have a great kind of screen game run after catch receiver. I think they have some guys who can do it. JSN's very good at it, but I think there's some guys that you could add that could be a nice addition to how the Seahawks ideally are playing, giving them some lower risk options for their quarterback to get rid of the ball quickly and still get yards after catch. I also don't see a big bodied X receiver. I think that that's still a position that if you find somebody that you like, they don't grow on trees. You take a big bodied X and you see how it goes, even if it's a developmental player and he doesn't play pretty much most of this season. That's fine by me. I think it's going to be hard for almost any draft pick to get significant snaps on a Super Bowl winning roster. So I think wide receiver is great shape. You don't need to do anything, but I don't see it as locked in as quarterback. Then you get to running back. This one's not a surprise. I mean, Zach Charbonnet, don't know when you're going to get him back. So your depth chart there is somewhere like probably George Halani, Emmanuel Wilson, and then some combination of Kenny McIntosh, Velus Jones, Cam Akers, Jacardier Wright. You've also got Robbie Oots and Brady Russell as your fullbacks, right? So this position group's just not set. There's no question about it. It is maybe the position group that is most unsettled on the entire roster. And maybe the team has more information about Zach Charbonnet. Maybe they feel more confident he's going to be back earlier, whatever. But this feels like the spot most likely to get additional talent infused into it, especially in the draft, which is unfortunate in the sense that it's not a good running back draft. So it's not the position you want to be entering the draft, needing to find a starting caliber player. That's just the state of things, but it's also the truth. Tight end I talked about already, AJ Barner, Eric Saubert, Elijah Arroyo, Nick Callerup. I think that is set. Like, I don't see any reason to add anybody else. Not to mention that Brady Russell can also play tight end. So You don't need any other tight ends, period. When you get to offensive line, you have your starting offensive line from last year. All of them are back. All of them are back. And I know people don't love Anthony Bradford, and that's fine. But he did start, I think, every game for you last year, unless I'm mistaken, and did pretty well relative to, I think, people's expectations, how low they were. But behind, I think, Anthony Bradford, who's the only, I think is the only player that there's a chance you could try to push for starting snaps. Bryce Cable, Mason Richman are both interesting names there. Christian Haynes, maybe he comes back and surprises after getting chances and failing. But I think Bryce Cable and Mason Richman are more likely to be the guys that are challenging there. I absolutely think that you could add another guard in the draft. I also think there's some interesting guards in this draft. And I don't think it's a bad thing to ever just continue to add to the trenches, continue to add competition, and let the best man win. So I don't think that position group is completely locked, but it is well stocked. It's guys that have been with you. Like, there's not a lot of turnover. These are guys that were in that locker room all of last year, that are still in that locker room, that know the system, that the coaches know them, and vice versa. You could easily not make any changes, and the team could feel fine about that. At center, you've got Jalen Sundell, Oluwatimi, and Federico Merenges, also all on the team last year. I don't think I have ever seen, by the way, tackle I didn't mention, Charles Cross, Abe Lucas, Josh Jones is back, Amari Kite's back, Logan Brown. Everybody that you had last year on the offensive line through the entire room is back. That is crazy. Like, that does not happen. I've never seen that happen. We're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 players in one position group that all were here a year ago. That is wild. So the amount of continuity in the offensive line room is, I think, unparalleled and a real strength. But it's also an opportunity that if the team wants to bring in more competition, they can. But they're in really, really good shape there. And I think that's a real possibility that they stick with what they've got. I also, like I said, I would not hate it if they bring in some more guard competition at all. So then let's go to the defensive side. And defensively, let's start with the defensive interior group. You still got Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, Jaron Reed as your starting, like, interior defensive linemen. Now, they don't always start 3. Sometimes they are 2, but that's just the reality. Behind those guys, you've got Mike Morris, Brandon Peely, Riley Mills, Bubba Thomas, and J.R. Singleton. Now, the real ones out there, the true sickos, will pick up something from that list as well. It's the same group as last year. Like, that is literally who the team ended with for their interior defensive side last season. Nobody new, nobody lost. That's pretty crazy too. And it was one of, if not the best, interior defensive line groups in the NFL. So I think I see that as a massive position of strength. Now, what I will say, when you talk about how locked in it is as a position group, Leonard Williams in the last year of his deal, Jaron Reed, likely the last year maybe of playing. And you don't know what you've got in Riley Mills yet. I think we all are very excited about what he could be. But you could go from Leonard Williams and Jaron Reed and Byron Murphy to Byron Murphy and Riley Mills as soon as 2027. Brandon Peely being the third. J.R. Singleton's a guy I believe in. I think it has some juice to his game. So we'll see. Like, that it's not the craziest thing that the Seahawks, if they see a defensive lineman, a defensive tackle that they like, could decide to add. That is not out of the realm. It might seem a little crazy for 2026, but if you look beyond 2026, it's not that crazy. If you look at edge, the edge position, DeMarcus Lawrence, Uchenna Nwosu, Derek Hall, all back from last year, right? Jared Ivey, Conroe Toole, and Jalen Gaines. Also guys that are back. Jalen Gaines was out injured, so he wasn't really part of the team, but he was part of mini camps, training camps, stuff like that. I liked what I saw from him, but was injured and not part of the team for most of the year. Some people are listing Jamie Sheriff as part of the edge group. He was squarely part of the inside linebacker group last year, so I don't see him as the edge anymore, but you know, he's somewhere on the roster. Of those guys, all of them were on the team last year other than Gaines, and Gaines had experience with the team. So there's not new, and there's also some still waiting about the DeMarcus Lawrence thing to get it officially that he's back, but all signs seem to point that he is going to be back. Uchenna Nwosu, I think signs point that he's going to be back, but he still does have a massive cap number, so we'll see if there's any change there. Derek Hall in the last year of his deal. So edge to me is not totally settled for 2026. I'm excited about Jared Ivey and Conroe Toole potentially getting more reps and maybe growing up with the team. But I also see that as a place where you absolutely could be adding. And especially if you now put the lens on of beyond this year, DeMarcus Lawrence almost certainly won't be back. Uchenna Nwosu almost certainly won't be back. And Derek Hall, there's no guarantee he's going to be back depending on where you're putting your money. I hope he's like at least a 80 to 90% chance that you've extended him, but no guarantee. So that position group, as soon as 2027, becomes a real question mark. So edge, even more, like at least at defensive tackle, if you told me you are really betting on Byron Murphy, Riley Mills, and Brandon Peely to and like J.R. Singleton to be your future defensive tackle group, I could get behind that. It's a little bit of a projection, but I can get behind that. Having your edge group beyond this year be maybe Derek Hall if you re-sign him, Jared Ivey, and Conroe Toole, that is a huge projection. And I like Jared Ivey and Conroe Toole, but they just have not got enough snaps to have any idea whether they are going to be starting caliber, difference-making edge players at a position that's a super high priority. So edge, from a roster management standpoint, continues to be a pretty big priority. Then you get to inside linebackers as we kind of move back from front to back. You've got Drake Thomas and Ernest Jones under contract for the next few years. Tyrese Knight still on his rookie deal. Patrick O'Connell, same thing. You've got Chris Paul Jr. You've got Jamarcus Weston. You've got Jamie Sheriff. Like, I think that position group's set. Like, I don't see any need to add more to that group, which is ironic given the fact that I thought it was a really questionable group going into last year, and I was wrong, as were I think some others. Then you look to cornerback. And cornerback, you know, they've added a bunch to it. It's not necessarily big names, but there's a lot of names. You've got Devin Witherspoon, Nicky Manwari, Josh Jobe, all starters from last year, all back. So you notice so far, no change to the starting lineup. Behind them, you've got Nehemiah Pritchett. You've got Noah Igbenogany. You've got Shamar Jean Charles. Like, after the starting three, there are real questions. Now, there are guys that have played NFL snaps, but there's questions there. So of the defensive groups we've talked about so far, that one is the least nailed down for depth. And I think some people talk about it as like, my God, we need to draft a corner first pick it's an emergency. I don't see it that way. I don't see it that way. I think there have been plenty of years where the Seahawks have had two really good corners and one bad corner, or two mediocre corners and one bad corner, and it hasn't been necessarily like the top priority. I think having the Seahawks have 3+ starters at the cornerback position. Most teams cannot say that. If one of them goes down, which did happen last year, both for Witherspoon and for Nick Eamon-Wari, then you're going to have to trust that one of these players is going to be able to step in and be good for you. So it makes a lot of sense to add to the competition there. It seems very obvious that that's a position. And I don't know if you guys have been following this at all. If you haven't, I will fill you in a little bit. So from a 30 visit standpoint, 30 visits, each team gets a visit with 30 different prospects before the draft, where they get to have them come out to the facility, have their doctors look at them, have interviews, stuff like that, right? There's two that I know of that have been confirmed so far, or reported so far, I would say. Chris Johnson, cornerback, who they also met with at the Combine, and Andre Fuller, a cornerback from Toledo, who also is a corner. So you've got two guys who have confirmed 30 visits, both cornerbacks. If you want to know from a cornerback position how many the team met with at the draft, they met with Keith Abney. They met with Brandon Cisse, Colton Hood, Devin Moore. They met with Avion Terrell, D'Angelo Pons, Chris Johnson. So they've met with a lot of corners. It's pretty clear cornerback is part of their draft strategy. It's also not really clear that anyone's going to be pushing for a lot of snaps in 2026. Then you get to safety, and it's Julian Love and Ty Okada. Ty Okada started 11 games for you last year, but he is technically a new starter with Kobe Bryant gone. It's the only new starter on the defensive side of the ball. Behind those guys, you've got AJ Finley, Rodney Thomas, DeAnthony Bell, and Maxon Hook. And I think that it would be good to add more competition to this group. I think AJ Finley is a really interesting prospect. I know they're very excited about him. I really like DeAnthony Bell. I think Rodney Thomas seems like an appealing, intriguing player. I've not seen enough Maxon Hook to have a strong opinion on him one way or another. The team kept him around. The team has a pretty good idea of like what makes a good safety. So the fact that he's still around, I think at least piques my interest. But if they used their first round pick on a safety, it wouldn't shock me at all. I think that there is, I really like the way Ty Okada played last year. I'm fine with him being a starting safety. I think you need to push him still. And it's not clear to me that the guys behind him are the ones to push him. Maybe they will. But I think adding another player there makes some sense. Not required, but would make some sense. And then from a special team standpoint, Jason Myers, Michael Dixon, Crystal, all part of the team, all signed, not a real question mark there. I do think you could make the case that maybe it's time to get another kicker, not because of any Jason Myers issues, but just because he is very expensive and older. And at some point you can create some roster, some cap space by moving to a younger, cheaper kicker, but it's not required. So we just went through the whole roster, and I gotta say, I think it would have been a bigger mistake to me if the Seahawks went out and were aggressive in adding players than it was to basically just bring those guys back. That's a really, really strong roster. And the offensive line situation to me is crazy to have that much continuity. And when I've talked to John Benton, he's admitted, he's worked with a lot of different lines. He's rarely had a situation where he feels like every player could be a starter. And I think that's how he feels about this group. So I mean, it's a little bit of an unique situation for Seahawks fans to have a roster this strong, an offensive line this deep, a defensive tackle room this deep and good. And so part of why I wanted to do this episode was I'm seeing a lot of, man, the Rams are the best team. And I'm not getting into all that stuff in depth, but I see a Super Bowl winning roster that was the best team in football, that had the highest point differential of any team, returning pretty much everybody with another year in the system, another year together, the best locker room chemistry in the NFL. I think the best coaching staff in the NFL that added more interesting names and ideas with Zach Orr and Daniel Stern and the new running backs coach. And you've got, Brian Fleury bringing stuff from Kyle Shanahan. Like, I don't see this. I saw some like best rosters in the NFL, and the Seahawks were like 5th or something. And okay. I mean, people could say whatever they want at this point, but I don't think the Seahawks are behind 5 teams or 4 teams in terms of roster talent. I don't see it. So, it's kind of fascinating. Like, as you go back through it again, it's like, yeah, corner would be a good place to add. Safety would be a good place to add. Maybe another guard would be a good place to add. None of those are really pressing for starting spots. Maybe the corner, but you just signed Josh Jobe to a contract. You really believe that the rookie's going to come in and take his spot? If he can, great. But it's very, very rare, even for the most high integrity organization in the NFL, to hand out a $24 million contract and have that guy not start. Like, that's tough. So maybe the best place that you have some chance of somebody winning a starting role as a rookie would be right guard. But you got to climb a pretty big mountain. Anthony Bradford, Mason Richmond, Bryce Cabledew, Christian Haynes, like all the guys that are already here, you're going to have to beat out every single one of those guys. And if they do, awesome. That means that they're very, very good. But not easy. Not easy. A couple names that I will mention that got my attention on the offensive line. I'll actually share that in a second. Before I do, we'll take a look at some super chats. Make sure you give the show a like and click subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you go over to SimplySeattle.com. Use promo code HawkBlogger15. Get up to 15% off get 15% off, not up to. Get 15% off your purchase at SimplySeattle.com. Use code HawkBlogger15. Seahawks gear. And hey, if you're a Sonics person, man, Sonics look like they're coming back. Pretty good sign that they're coming back. Get your Sonics gear now. I know guys over at Simply Seattle are huge Sonics fans, so I'm sure they are very, very happy today. I know I tweeted out that, like, I'm a Blazers guy, so Sonics don't matter to me one way or the other, but I have not enjoyed watching NBA basketball for a while. It's a hard watch for me, and I know that led to a lot of controversy. That's not a fact based thing that you can argue. Someone's like, that's incorrect, and I'm like, my opinion can't be incorrect. It's my opinion. I don't like watching NBA basketball like the way I used to. I used to love NBA basketball. Not a big fan at this point, but I'm happy for people that are Sonics fans, and go to SimplySeattle.com and get your gear using code HawkBlogger15. Also, get your book, We Did Not Care. Well, technically it's my book, but it's your book if you buy it. Number 5 on the New York Times bestseller list. You heard it. Number 5 on the New York Times bestseller list. We Did Not Care, by yours truly. You can get it at hawkblogger.com/book. And I've seen a bunch of people have started to leave reviews over at Amazon, which I really appreciate. thank you for doing that. And yeah, it's fun. When I was down in Portland yesterday, unfortunately for memorial of a good friend of mine, I I was talking to guys and a bunch of my old high school friends, and they keep running into people that either watched the show or got the book and want a signed copy, and um, they just give me endless amounts of shit for it, which is great. It's great. I need everyone's help in making sure. Actually, I don't really need that much help, but I do enjoy when people give me shit. So feel free to do it yourself. All right. So let's check out Super Chats. African meant to say something. Oh, he's back with the second one here. Thank you. Says, since you're probably going to have to interview later, it's pronounced EB Nogane. EB Nogane. Interesting. Well, thank you. I will look. Like, I basically, my pronunciation was based off of broadcast, listening to broadcast while I was watching him play. So I'm going to trust you, but I also have to go back and double check because I was hearing something different. But thank you so much. It is really important to me that I pronounce names correctly. I will not always do it well. I will try my best. So thank you. Al Shalloway says, I think our offense and defense will both be stronger this year for a variety of reasons. Wondering where you see improvements. Preseason, Sam and Rashid. Mike's getting more inventive on defense to name two, plus a young team. Yeah, it's a really good question. I've kind of been banging this drum for a while, and this is going to be the most boring, non-headliney, non-clickbaity kind of reality that Seahawks fans are going to have to just accept. The Seahawks' best chance for being better next year is players already on the roster from last year getting better or getting more comfortable or adding things to their game, like playing better together, new scheme stuff. All that are all opportunities. And the point that was made there about Rashid Shaheed and Sam Darnold is a perfect one. I don't believe those guys ever really got on exactly the same page, and having a full training camp, full off season where they can be throwing together. Remember that NFC Championship game where they opened up with that pass from Sam Darnold to Rashid Shaheed that really shook the Rams. I think you're going to see a lot more of that next year. I think he's going to be a bigger part of the offense. I think that the offensive line is going to be better. I think anytime you have an offensive line that is good and gets better, your whole offense generally improves. Your quarterback play improves. Your running back play improves. Like you can have more tight ends go out in routes. Like there's lots of things that change when your offensive line gets more and more dependable. The tight end group I just talked about is young and I think on the rise, on the come, so to speak. So AJ Barner already was, had his coming out party to some extent last year. I think there's more there. I think Elijah Arroyo has a ton more to offer. I think that Nick Callerup was a really promising player and can get better. I liked what Eric Saubert did last year. All of those guys are really, really good. I think Robbie Oots, as a rookie last year, forgotten name, fullback, just getting to play fullback for the first time in his life, I thought really showed promise as the season went on. Now let's hope that his health is recovered, and it was a neck, which is always scary when it's a neck, but let's hope that he's back to full health. I think he can make a big jump. And then Torrey Horton is just a name that, we all loved last year when he was playing, had some injuries. He's going to have to work through that, prove that he can be available, but an immense talent. So that's pretty much everybody on offense. I've said that Sam Darnold, he should play. I think he's going to have his best season as a pro next year. I really do. I think he's going to play with so much more confidence and so much more comfort. I just think he's going to be a very different player than he has been previously. Defensively, Nicky Manwari was a rookie last year. Byron Murphy just started to emerge as a pass rusher. I think Derek Hall's got a lot more to offer than what he was able to demonstrate last year. Had 2 sacks in the Super Bowl. So, I can go on and on. Drake Thomas, I think, is a Pro Bowl level linebacker that did not get to start all the games last year. So yeah, I just see opportunity for growth all across the board. And I don't think the draft is going to be the thing that moves the needle that much. That's part of what I've been trying to say and not necessarily articulating it that well. I wasn't that enthusiastic about free agency because I didn't really see an opportunity to improve the roster significantly. I'm not that enthusiastic about the draft because I'm not sure I see a ton of opportunities to improve the ceiling of the 2026 team. I see more opportunity to create competition and depth for future years. That's part of why I was most excited about the Max Crosby trade, because I did think that would take a good position and make it great, and a very important one. Outside of that, you're going to be looking at a team that won a Super Bowl, that was the best team in the NFL very clearly, and is back. And that's your story. That's your story. So that's kind of where I see, that's where I kind of see that group. Let me pull up my list of, interior offensive linemen that I was looking at. So I was watching a little bit of Caden Proctor because this is a guy that was a left tackle in college. He weighs over 350 pounds, big guy. I think he's going to be a guard. He has shorter arms, like 33-inch arms. I think he's going to be a guard in the NFL. He's 350, but he moves really well. Like, I am interested in him as a guard. I wouldn't hate him as a 32nd overall pick. I think he's that level of talented. I don't know that he gets in there and starts right away, but he's a guy that could, I think, be a people mover. And when you look at, let me pull this up and make sure I've got, I was looking at this before. Yeah, he was one of the highest graded zone blocking tackles in college football last year. 86.8 zone blocking tackle. So he's a mover. And that's what I saw as well. Another guy that I liked interior offensive line wise, that I hadn't watched as much film of before. I'd seen him play because I watched a lot of Oregon games last year, but it was good to kind of zero in on him, was Emmanuel Pregnon. He played a little bit of left tackle as well, but I think he's pretty clearly a guard. And he also was a pretty good zone blocker. In fact, the number one in college football last year, had a 93.8 zone blocking grade. So I was watching some of his film. I think he's a good mover. He's definitely smaller than Caden Proctor, but so is almost everybody. He's a guy that's going to be more like 320-ish. In fact, I'm going to look him up real quick to see if we've got what he was measured at the combine. So Pregnon came in at 6'4", 315 at the combine. And he had a 35-inch vert, which is 99th percentile, had a 9-foot broad, 95th percentile, had a 8-2 split, which was 66th percentile. But yeah, I think he's an interesting player that has, I don't know that I'm spending 32 on him, but he's also interesting. we've Jennings Dunker, everyone's talked about, so I'm not going to spend much time on him. But the last guy that, I mean, there's a few other guys that I kind of watched that were interesting to me. Bo Stevens from Iowa, so we can get another Iowa lineman. I watched some of his Senior Bowl stuff. He had some bad moments. He had some okay moments. He was the number 2 graded zone blocking guard in college football last year. So I think he's a guy you're talking about, like, I think day 3. Maybe he ends up in day 2, but I think he's a day 3 guy. So maybe he's like if you can get him in the 6th round, that could be interesting. The 5th round, that could be interesting. And then who was the other name? One other name. By the way, while I was watching the Senior Bowl footage of the 1v1s, I couldn't help but notice Logan Fano, the edge. I really like him. I think if you can get him in the 6th round, I think that would be a great pickup. He's kind of one of my like low key draft crushes, I guess, if you look at it that way. So let me see if I had this somewhere else. Okay, hold on. Let me pull this open. Pull open guards. Yeah, I watched a little bit of Kalen Rutledge from Georgia Tech. Decent, not like nothing that moved the needle for me. I saw some Jalen Farmer from Kentucky. I liked a little bit of what I saw there. He's a little bit of a bigger dude, 6'5", 320. Not necessarily like a clear zone guy. Who was the other guy that I saw? I think he was maybe a tackle that could be a guard. Where did he go? Kalen Rutledge. Well, he's not. I'm not. Demetrius Crownover from Texas A&M. He's a big dude, 6'7", 336. He's an interesting one to me. I saw some really promising moments of him in 1v1. He also had some rough moments. But interestingly, he is a pretty good zone blocker. He's played tackle. I think he's definitely a guard in the NFL. A little tough at 6'7", but I think he's an interesting one. Let me see if he has enough. He does not have enough data he measured at 6'7", 320. And then he had a 5'1", 440, which is the 80th percentile. So yeah, he's a pretty big dude and moved pretty well. So those are just a couple of names that kind of I thought were interesting. But we'll keep going as time goes on. All right. So Robbie Red says, why didn't we get any comp picks? Love the show. Well, so let's be clear. Comp picks come a year later. So the comp picks that teams are getting for the 2026 draft are based off of last offseason. And the Seahawks signed Sam Darnold. They signed DeMarcus Lawrence. They signed Josh Jones. They Marquez Valdez-Scantling. They did not. I mean, the Cooper Kupp one didn't count, but they did not have many of their players get signed for big deals. So last year they did not earn any comp picks. That's why they didn't get any for 2026. They are still in position to get 4 comp picks for 2027 next year. Just to be clear about how that works. All right. Somebody said you had to order the book from Amazon. You can order it there as well, but you can get it at hawkblogger.com/book. Let me just make sure that's still working, because a few weeks ago, for some reason, it stopped working and I had to tell the publisher to turn it back on. Yeah, it is working. Now, it's generally just for the United States. If you're in the States, or in Canada are the 2 places that I think you can order it from there. If you need to go beyond there, then yeah, you might have to go to Amazon to pick up the book. All right. Scrolling back, seeing if I missed anything. So I'm going to do this at the very tail end of the show because I didn't want this to turn into a big violation of my own rules. But I'm already seeing that it's starting to become this flashpoint topic. I'm just going to say this once, and I think I'll probably only say this once. But the whole like millionaires tax in in Washington State that passed, and John Schneider talked about it being an impact on his show. A couple things there, just factual. One is the tax doesn't take effect till 2028, so it's not a this year or really a next year thing, although it can affect multi-year deals. Two, keep in mind that this was like an advantage that the Seahawks had of having no state income tax. Having one is not really a disadvantage. Most states do. It levels the playing field a little bit. Third thing I'd say is like people that say this is going to keep people from signing here. California has wildly high taxes, and it has not stopped people from signing for any of those teams in California. It's an issue. Let's not make it a political one. You can like the tax, hate the tax. I'm not here to argue that. I'm simply just trying to put some facts out about how it's going to affect the Seahawks. I think it's a little bit overstated how big of a deal this is for the Seahawks. But we'll find out as time goes on. All right. And yes, I did at the end because I don't want to turn this into some big political conversation. All right. Trap Cat with a super chat says, which NFC teams are you looking at to be real challengers in this upcoming season? That's probably a separate show, honestly, given where we are in this one. But I mean, the Rams and 49ers are going to be good. The Eagles are going to be good. Let me take a quick look at my sheet of where teams have added players. I think the Packers getting, Tucker Kraft back and healthy, getting Micah Parsons back, they could still be a good team. The Lions are a solid team, although I'm not sure I can say that so far they've really improved via free agency necessarily. The team to watch, quite honestly, not for this year and not in the NFC, but the New York Jets have quietly done some really interesting work to prepare for 2027, not for 2026, for 2027. They have 3 first-round picks, 3 in 2027. They could end up with a quarterback, with Jeremiah Smith, the phenomenal wide receiver. They could end up with lots of things. One of those picks is the Colts. Another one is where's the other one? Doesn't really matter. But anyway, I think the Jets have maybe 10 or 11 picks in 2027, and 3 of them are first. So like, I think the Jets are a team that has some quiet. Oh, I think it's the Cowboys, maybe. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Yeah, maybe it is the Cowboys. Someone else is saying the same thing. So, yeah, honestly, I just felt like the Seahawks and the Rams were in a different tier than everybody else last year. That proved to be true. I still kind of see it that way. I think the Chiefs, not in the NFC, but once Patrick Mahomes gets back, I just really like Ken Walker in an Andy Reid offense. I think he's going to be huge for them. And I think he's the best offensive weapon they've had in years. Better than Travis Kelce by far. So I think that could be a really good team in the AFC. And I didn't think there really was a good team in the AFC. I think the Broncos have a really nice roster. I don't believe Bo Nix is the guy. I just don't. Yeah, we got plenty of time to kind of sort all of this out. The 49ers, I mean, they've got a lot of top end talent, but it's also old and injured. If they all play and they all stay healthy, then they'll be really good and they'll be tough for sure. I just I'm not sure there's a team out there that, other than like the Rams, that I would consider a pretty clear equal to the Seahawks. So that's kind of where things stand. Last but not least, let me check Venmo, see if there are any Venmo super chats. All right. 1 second while I pull this up. Appreciate everybody that goes to venmo.com/Brian-Nemhauser. There are a few Venmo super chats. So let's do this. Logan Galvin says, do you think if we have a couple cornerbacks go down that we trade for Reek since he knows the defense? No, I don't believe that. Amit, Wilson, ! Not super flashy, but JS's type of signing. I like the idea of having him as a stopgap for the Charbonnet power role. I also like Mike Washington for the home run potential. The eventual backfield of Washington plus Charbs and Wilson as the backup sounds pretty good to me. Thoughts? Yeah, I like the addition of Manuel Wilson. I still want explosive capability out of the backfield. Mike Washington could be part of that. I don't know. I gotta really dig in on the running backs more in the draft because a lot of them were very fast. So now I gotta go back and see. But I'm just not loving the state of the running back room. I don't see a dude in there yet. And so I think it's pretty important that you get a little more explosion out of the run game than currently profiles for that group. But again, want to watch and see what they do the rest of the offseason. Jacob Hickman says, what teams do you believe have the most cap space since all the moves made? And do you think the Hawks are in the top 5 or 10 teams with the most cap space currently? Well, I don't actually need to think it. I can tell you because over the cap is the place. By the way, anyway, I'm not going to say it, but over the cap is the place you should go for salary cap stuff. There's other sites out there that have done some pretty questionable things in terms of how they've gotten their information from over the cap. So I definitely recommend supporting over the cap. They're the guys that do legitimately the best work. They've got the Seahawks as the 5th most cap space and the 5th most effective cap space. And they've signed 69 players. So you've got space for 21 more to get to 90. You're going to have your draft picks, your undrafted free agents. That's going to take up maybe 10, 12 spots. So if you think about that, you probably only have space for 7, 8 at most more free agents to be added or more players. Seahawks are in really good shape. I think a lot of that cap space is probably going to be used for extensions. Let's hope. My biggest hope in this is Derek Hall gets extended. Everyone's talking about JSN and Devin Witherspoon. I have zero doubts that those guys are going to get extended. Derek Hall does not have a contract beyond this year. Those other 2 guys can get a 5th-year option. So that's the one that for me, I'm going to keep watching and would be the most excited about if they signed it. Joey Hamilton says, if we trade out of 32, are we getting back one of those rounds we used on Shaheed? Brock brought up Iowa center Logan Jones, who could go in that range. Thoughts? I don't think center's a need. I think you could get a center if you're trying to challenge Olu. But Jalen Sundell is going to be your starting center, and he's going to be really good for years to come. I don't know why people are trying to replace him. As far as 32 trading out, yeah, I'll do a show where we'll go through trade values. You're going to be very underwhelmed. I mean, if you're trading out of 32, you're getting a 4th round pick, maybe, to get depending on how far back you move, you're not going to get anything super exciting. So I don't know that personally, a lot of people are like, oh, it's definitely go back and trade back. I'm like, I don't know if that's the move. I think you take the best player you can at 32, unless you get some kind of screaming deal to get a 3rd round pick or something like that. But I don't see it coming. All right, folks, that will do it for this episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. As I said, I'm going to be playing golf in Bandon Dunes for the rest of this week. So this channel will mostly be silent. Maybe will add some content along the way, but for the most part, it's going to be silent. So be back when I get back. There's a small chance I'll do something if something crazy happens this week, but not likely. So enjoy your week. Appreciate all of you. We're closing in on the league meeting, which will be the week after this one. It'll be, well, 2 weeks from today, as a matter of fact. I'll be down in Arizona for that. We'll get to talk to John Schneider again. We'll get to talk to Mike McDonald again and others. So we'll see you there. Take care.